Welcome to the Fat Tony's Podcast, where we bridge the gap between everyday life and expert insight. Join us in conversation with real-world experts, gaining practical advice and strategies to navigate the complexities of the modern world.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode and indeed a new series of the Fat Tony's podcast. Before we get started, I just want to say an enormous thank you to all of our guests from the first series and all of our listeners. The first series exceeded my wildest expectations in terms of listeners. So really thank you all so much. It's really made the second series possible. So moving on. Our guest today is a man of many talents. He's held the Frey Family Endowed Chair of Quantitative Finance at Stony Brook University, and prior to that was an academic director at the Laboratory of Excellence on Financial Regulation. He has more than 20 years of experience in the finance industry and 35 years of experience of research in pure and applied mathematics. If that wasn't enough, he's also an entrepreneur and has co-founded fintech firms Risk Data and Data Core, and his current research focuses on systemic risk and the anticipation of financial market crises. There's so much more I could say about today's guest, but it would take the entire podcast, I think, to list his accomplishments. So all I will say is, Raphael Douady, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Fat Tony's.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for this kind introduction. I like to say that I have several lives behind and hopefully ahead of me as well. But my usual joke is that I'm schizophrenic by at least three axes. Since first geographically, I live between Paris and New York, and currently in London, actually. Scientifically, I've been, oscillating between hard science, math, chaos theory, and softer science, economics, finance. And the third aspect is, of course, the division between the academic life and the entrepreneurial life, which again, requires completely different sets of skills.
Well, I always think it's healthy to reinvent yourself every 10 years or so. And it certainly sounds like you've done that. So a life well lived for sure. I want to get back to the start and talk a little bit about the beginning of your finance life. And you were really part of one of these first generation of what I would call academic quants that came upon Wall Street. People with physics, mathematics, PhD backgrounds. I'm curious to hear what the reception was like in the finance industry to that new way of thinking and what the environment was like, and if you have any anecdotes from that time.
Oh, yeah, many. It was a bit by chance. I mean, my first experience outside of pure mathematics, really, I studied as a pure mathematician. And there was a pivotal year in 86 where I proved a major theorem, question said by a famous mathematician and physicist, Vladimir Arnold. And so that made me famous, but at the same time, I had the need to do something else. And that's where I went to work for the space industry at that time. So for about 7 years, actually, I've been working in that space, first as an engineer. I mean, really dove into the pond of engineers, forget about the fancy mathematics, etc. And with pretty hard problems. Some of them were really hard. It was the beginning of imaging, dealing with the capacity of computers, with the speed at which you had to react, in the satellite control or spacecraft control. And then as a consultant, and then at some point, there was some technical reasons, but I had to move away from the space industry. This one was not my choice, but I was very attracted by the by the banks. And if you want an anecdote, I had really, because my family was much more academic. My father was a very prominent mathematician in France. member of Bourbaki, etc. And I wanted to do something else, and I was very attracted by the banking world, which I had no clue of, truly no clue of. So my first reaction was to say, well, if I want to know what's happening behind the scenes, I have to go to the corporate finance, so M&A, and then people look at me and said, well, why do you want to go there? I said, well, I'm interested. And then I had many interviews, but never a job offer. And then one day, one guy told me, people will always take you to interview because they barely see people with your kind of profile. They've never seen that, a pure mathematician like that. It's a complete foreign alien for them. So they will always give you an interview, but they will never give you a job because in this world, the only thing that matters is your Rolodex, and you have no Rolodex. Okay, sir, message understood. Let me go and have an executive MBA. So I went to the only school that was offering, this real type of executive MBA. That's INSEAD in France. And INSEAD, as a student, we usually hire people like you as professors, not as students. Said, well, obviously some line is missing on my CV, so I need to fill it in. And okay, if you want to, so I was to start INSEAD in January 94, and that, no joke. The Christmas Eve, so it was the 23rd of December of 93. A friend of mine who was trader at SocGen called me, Raphael, I know you want to go to the banking world. I know you need money, etc. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you have an appointment with the head of capital markets at SocGen.
Wow.
And then I said, but as you know very well that I'm starting INSEAD in a few weeks, just after New Year. I can't do that, etc. Don't discuss tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Okay, sir. Okay, I'll be there. And I have got the craziest interview. I mean, it's like, the reverse interview. I mean, it's like, I was explaining to the guy, I have no clue of capital markets. Even when I watch TV, I mean, I see the CAC 40 zap to another channel. That's no problem. I mean, we'll teach you we need your math. We'll teach you financial markets. Wow, people who pay you to teach you something. Okay. And then I said, a figure which to me seemed very good because it was just 3 times what I was earning in the space industry. So just took my salary in space industry. I just multiplied by 3. I said, is that okay? Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, very good. So you start next month, which is basically the day I was supposed to start INSEAD, I was supposed to start SocGen.
Wow.
And then so I go to the trading room, see my friends. How did it go? Well, I got the job. But how much? I said the figure. Did you ask or did he propose? No, I asked. You're stupid. You should have asked for twice as much. So that was showing you the need for mathematician at that time. You were asking, what was the ambience? So it was 94. Very important. People with a real math background. I'm not talking, of people who know a bit, have a master in math. I'm talking people who have a very strong math background. Was not the only one, but I was, one of those who have this very strong math background or physics, etc. There were not so many at that time. And with such a background, you were at a high standard. One of the reasons I realized afterwards is that it was a big time of Basel II. Banks had to implement all these value at risk system, etc. So there was a certain amount of work to be done. But also traders, it was the big boom of options in the early 90s. I mean, the option market really started in the 80s, but the boom of the market was in the early 90s. So there was a big demand for people who were able to do all sorts of calculations of exotic options, etc. Mostly in closed form, so very simple models compared to what we have today, because the computer capacity were not the one we know today. And so Interesting part was 2 years later. In 96, I remember, believe me, 94, 96, there was no competition. You arrive, you have some good training to do efficient algorithms. You get something that works, the computer was slower. So an optimizer, that would take them, hours. You make them work in minutes or in seconds. People were completely blazed and, say, okay, how much you want, etc. So that was really the atmosphere.
Was there a suspicion of the pure mathematical approach at that time? Was there still a belief that to be a trader was instinctual?
It was split. And jobs were actually pretty much like we have today with AI. I will go to that. It was split because there was, the quants were the quants, traders were traders, some traders were quant. You have to know that France is very mathematical. So a lot of traders were from Polytechnique and etc. So they have some good math training. Very unlike the even in the US, you had more surprisingly enough, you have more quantitative traders than in the UK, where you have this idea of picking, on the street, 16 years old kids, you pick them to be hackers, you pick them to be traders, you put them on the screen, and the best one, will make it, etc. And then eventually they will learn the math.
That's interesting. So, it's almost as if France's mathematical heritage allowed it to be slightly ahead of the curve.
I don't know whether they were ahead of the curve business-wise, but they were definitely ahead of the curve quant-wise. And there was even when I went to the US, so I went to the US in September 95, and simply arriving there was a reputation as the French quant. The French quant was a reputation.
Right. That's fascinating. Okay, so I want to move on slightly. I feel like I could talk to you for the whole hour about that, but I'm going to try and stay disciplined.
Yeah.
So these areas of kind of financial mathematics you work on and, indeed Taleb and other people work on, tail risk hedging, systemic risk, anticipation of market crashes. One question I often hear in the fat owners community is it possible to use these strategies as a retail investor? Or do you really need the scale of an institution to make this kind of stuff work?
Of course you can use it as a retail investor for the good reason that, I left Stony Brook at the end of 2018. There was some financial issues in the university that made it difficult to run the program. And I had a very good opportunity to work with a Chinese startup that were well funded. It was the project was very attractive. It was in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a bit the Chinese Silicon Valley, very enthusiastic people. The only thing that I didn't anticipate was COVID. So the project blew up in the mid of 2020 because it was evident that we could not sustain, the restrictions led by COVID. Since then, I'm still, having my PhD students. I took back my position at Paris 1. On the academic side, but all my entrepreneurial life goes to be an advisor to small funds, and actually I'm only advising small hedge funds, family offices, etc. And really, I wouldn't call that complete retail, but it's not established firms, managing billions. It's firms managing, in the much smaller amount of money, often family offices who just want to improve their risk management or firms who have some cash and who want to improve their cash management. That's exactly the type of people I'm advising. So yeah, it's trading strategies, risk management, better understanding statistics, and often really going into their own trading and trying to improve it to find ways. So yeah, that's pure retail. And believe me, there are some math. There are some real math we are doing, simulations and understanding what's going on.
It's good to know. I know there's a slight mythology around some of these techniques that have been built, and it's really interesting to know that it is possible at a retail level.
I want to say an anecdote about that. which tells, that precisely, that breaks a bit this a priori that people have about using math, etc. So it's a friend of mine. I know his family is wealthy. He was somebody I knew as a student, very good friend of my brother. And so their family made some money, I think, in the real estate operations. Himself is in computer science, and his brother is managing the family money. So basically, and I know the whole family. And one day there was a party, and it was slightly after the 2008 crisis. And I remember his brother coming to me, and so we are talking. So how is the business going? How did you survive? Oh, you know what? I lost 3/4 of our money during the crisis. It's terrible, etc. I mean, really painful. I mean, there's family money, etc. And I look at him and I say, that, I mean, we know each other. You know exactly what I do. Why, when you saw the crisis coming, why did you even, talk to me about it? It's not about consulting. I would have give you my advice for completely free. I mean, we're friends, etc. It's not, we would look at it, give you some basic things to avoid this kind of catastrophe. Yeah. I realized afterwards when I saw what happened, I said, I was stupid. I should have called Raphael.
It reminds me of something you said at RWRI. Yes, but the secret is to buy the insurance first, then the car once you've secured the insurance.
Yeah, exactly. And you will see so often people are in the... I mean, I can't blame them. I've done that mistake myself many times. You're involved in something. I can say, I was involved, in my risk data business, and then it was 2011. And a friend of mine, very, very good friend, very close friend. I mean, we were doing math together for years, etc. And, he told me, there's this stuff, Bitcoin. I'm going to put 1,000 euros in it, but give me anything. I mean, give me even 100 euros. I will just... what did it cost me to simply, wire him 100 euros to one of my best friends? And don't worry, I manage it, etc. He was telling me he was passionate with this, Byzantine general system, etc. And he told me, I manage it. Today, he has a fortune, and I missed it. And just simply, not because I didn't want to, because I forgot. I was busy with some other stuff.
And that happens. That's life, right? So this is interesting, talking about advising against this kind of thing. So I've heard you say, and I heard Taleb and a few others mention this as well, that every model has an error. Every single one, every model has some sort of error.
Right.
And whatever you estimate from a model must logically also have an error. So I suppose my question to you is, how do you go about identifying model error? Or if you know you can't identify model error, how do you account for it?
So I rather the second thing, because there are two things. There is something that is, today people give it the word, self-organized criticality. But basically, very often you will find that even a model that is on the spot, for some time, the market will tend to drift to the edge of the model because the model is being arbitraged, because it's being played, etc. So we'll tend to drift towards the model invalidation and some other model. I was giving the example of arbitrage pricing theory and the equilibrium theory in economics, where they are almost opposite. One says, things will converge to equilibrium, and the other thing is there is no such thing as an equilibrium, because if there is something, it will be scaled up until and of course, the arbitrage argument, which says if there is an arbitrage, it will be cancelled because it will be used up to a volume that makes it, inexistent. Then precisely that volume is in fact an equilibrium volume. So you see, you have this is a good example where you have a balance between two theories, and the actual trading of banks and funds, etc., will happen at the edge of those two theories, where none of them is valid.
So it's almost like you have these theories pulling in different vectors, and the reality kind of emerges out of kind of place between these.
Yeah. So you will see this phenomenon often. So the question now is where do you identify, etc. I mean, I like this joke, of this John Box, who was saying all models are wrong, but some are useful. And so the question is, what is the difference between a useful model and a useless model? And a model for which you twig a hypothesis and you get something that is still meaningful, not completely wrong, at least signs are correct, etc. And a model for which, as soon as you change the least thing, then it drives you to the complete wrong decision, then that makes the difference between a model that's useful. So it's kind of a robustness of the model that matters to say that the model is useful. So the fact that the model can resist externalities, breakage of hypothesis, the classical one that we use with Nassim is, of course, the fat tails, but there are plenty of things other than fat tails that may happen. And so a model that is kind of robust to all those different things is what, makes it useful. So yeah, by how much that's experience, etc. So there is precisely, that the difference between reality and the reality always come with, and that's something that you learn by doing engineering. You can do, beautiful math, etc. But at some point you have to say feet on earth. And I was lucky enough to be kind of educated scientifically in this mood of having the head in the sky, but the feet always on earth.
It's interesting. I'm a software engineer by trade, and certainly in software engineering, your mental model versus what can actually happen, because in software things tend to be more and more interconnected now. So you have scaling errors of nonlinearity where things can go catastrophically wrong if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And we saw that earlier in the year. The security company who released the update, and then half the airports, half the flights around the world were cancelled back in October. I can't remember the name of the company now. So it's interesting. I think as well, something I've heard you say before is about the importance of information. So when facing a threat of unknown importance or an emergency, information has the highest value. So without it, we tend to take paranoid measures. And that, what you were saying about all models are wrong, and I think I've heard it paraphrased as all models are wrong, some are deadly. I think people can misconstrue that to mean models are useless. And I don't think that's quite true. Models can be useful, but you just have to be aware of what you're dealing with. It is a model.
That's a good point. The other point, where I have a little disagreement with Nassim, or it's more, I think, in the phrasing of it, because when I see Nassim acting, he's not mad at all. But paranoia itself can be deadly, and people don't realize that. That is, it's not a safe. The famous take a snake for a stick is better to take a stick for a snake than a snake for a stick. Sometimes taking a stick for a snake itself is deadly, and that's so. It's all a matter of excess. That is, the radical attitude is very often not the right attitude at all. And it's a wrong thing. It's a wrong idea to think that you have a complete safe haven by taking a radical attitude.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think that applies to so much in life, not just finance, but, I've often said any philosophy taken to its extreme is self-destructive.
Oh,
so, it's about that balance. Okay, I'm going to move on again. Again, each one of these areas I could spend an hour talking to you. But I want to move on a little bit to another recent thing in your life, which is your primers courses that you started doing, these mathematical courses. I want to ask you about, obviously you're a man of many talents and you've got your fingers in a lot of different pies, but what led you to create this? What was the impetus and why do you think they were needed?
Well, there's a history that made it, like I just told you about the history of that brought me to finance, which was a bit unexpected. There are two things. First, okay, don't blame me for arrogant, etc. It's just a matter of nature. I'm a born teacher. And everybody tells me that about it around me. Even my wife is joking that, if I don't teach enough, then I become pressure on the environment, etc. So yeah, there is this thing, I like explaining, etc. I like finding the right images. I'm very curious about the psychology of everybody to see what are the triggers that make them understand something, etc. I like conveying. You cannot invent it. You are not. And then was again. So wait a second. Yeah, we sold Risk Data in 2014. The software company, because I have a software and a consulting company. So my consulting company is still called Risk Data. The American company, the French company was a software company. They were basically, at that time, the consulting company was essentially consulting for Risk Data clients. So it was a Risk Data Inc. And so this one stayed, but we sold the Risk Data SA as a software. And was just before I started both Tony Brook and Datacore. And Nassim said, okay, well, we could do those teaching. What do you think of it? Yeah, okay, let's do a try. So we did the first session of this real world risk stuff in 2014, and it was successful. It was very nice. People liked it. And then I joined Tony Brook. I met Robert Fry at that time, very good guy, and Robert loved the idea. So we had a meeting with Robert, Nassim, and myself, and we decided to make it on a regular basis. So I think there was one trial session in 2014. Then we did the regular. At the beginning it was twice, 3 times a year. Then now it's back to once a year. Sorry. But so we decided to start this. And again, this is this little thing where I like teaching students, but I like teaching to people to whom it's hard to teach. And I remember, for instance, one of the sessions we had, Nassim just gave a talk at the Pentagon, and there was a group of 10-ish Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs coming to mathematicians to learn about risk. Isn't that funny? It's just impossible. So they were here. At that time, it was physical in the room. It was at the Harvard Club, and we're having a drink so it starts on the Monday, Tuesday evening. We're having a drink, and you could see the guy. One of them was a giant, like the Dwayne Johnson and his kind of caliber, and the others were all, they're pretty solid, etc. And they were always making remarks, like, guys, when you're on the ground, what you need is a knife and a lamp. The rest is just secondary. Kind of, you're teaching that. So of course, and then we're on the Tuesday evening and having a drink, with the guys, with the group. Not only those Navy SEALs, but I was talking to them and say, guys, I'm a bit bothered because, how us mathematicians, are going to teach you anything in terms of risk. When we teach traders, we can understand we have maybe some edge, but respect to people like you who are on the ground risking their life every day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Why are you coming here? And I say, Raphael, you don't realize you're giving us the language. We are speaking to our hierarchy, and the hierarchy, they're giving us, principles and things that make no sense for us. And now you're giving us the words to answer them.
I've heard that before, not with RWI, but with Nassim's writing as well. I've heard people say that it's giving words to things they've intuitively haven't had the elocution to be able to put it into words.
Yeah, exactly.
Really thankful for that. And, I was on RWI this year, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience. And yeah, just amazing. And you're wanting to teach, not the impossible, but teach those it's difficult to teach. That's fantastic as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to move on again. Normally what we do in these is I ask the community if they have any questions they want to ask our guests. And normally we get, a handful of questions. You have had the most questions of any guest on this podcast ever. So I'm going to devote a little bit more time than I normally would to asking these questions. So these might be a little bit disorganized, a little bit rapid fire, but this is always fun because you never know what people are going to ask. It's a little bit random. So the first one I'll ask, what are you long and what are you short on for the next 4 years? They've said it doesn't necessarily have to be financial.
Yeah, at a point in my life where I have basically no choice. And on the one hand, I made many mistakes that made me today still needing to work to make to pay the rent, etc. I'm not, sitting on a big, financial cushion. And I think, things have changed. I mean, I've been trying to manage different horses. Probably that was by itself maybe a mistake. I should have focused or having, more pure phases where I was doing one thing and then another thing. So I would put aside the risk data period where really I was completely in risk data. Then, I was again, split between academics and Sarah had the Labex, had the Stony Brook. And I mean, I'm trying to focus now. I have no choice to use, those few years that I have to work hard to really make, some financial cushion that I need for myself and my family. That's a bit, while I'm long off in some way, it is entrepreneurial things where I need to make something that will work out with all the experience I have accumulated. So I'm advising a hedge fund led by a friend of mine who is hopefully will be very successful. And again, really making all correct, avoid all the mistake that we can do. There will be, etc. What's the risk? The risk is political. Same thing as we started risk data. We took in the face the 2008 crisis. We took two crises actually, because when we started, it's like we started 2 years before 9/11. 9/11 was already a difficult thing. We made a plus out of a minus by moving to the fund of hedge fund business, helping fund of hedge funds. And we were at some point the leading risk management software for funds of hedge funds. And that would have never happened if there was no 9/11. We would have stayed in regulatory stuff, etc. And we were very successful until 2008. And 2008 was both the absolute proof that our software, our risk approach was the best risk approach in terms of crisis. And yet a terrible hit to the company, because our clientele itself was completely devastated. And so we had to restart actually much more on the regulation side. You see it, something like this. And that's actually what led me to the Labex. So you see, I mean, again, you see, I made a mistake by going to some entrepreneurship because I'm always attracted by this light. And then I took the COVID crisis in the face. You see, you do things like that. Now I'm again, building a thing which I think if it's purely entrepreneurial, etc., and the world stays normal, then the chances of success are pretty high. But if I look at what are the risks that I may face is, complete mess up in the world because for political reasons, the world is unstable today, etc. So that's the kind of thing I'm fearing. But while I'm long off, this kind of thing. Now, unlike Nassim, I think that Bitcoins have a future. I'm currently working on a Bitcoin strategy, purely quantitative. That is many years now that I've been following it. Never had the opportunity to put some money on it and make it even a small track record. So it's still in simulation, but it's like paper trading, but the paper trading is very successful. So now I'm trying to sell that. So if you're asking what I'm going to belong, it's very possible that one of the success I will get will be simply from cryptos.
It's interesting what you're saying about regret and about Bitcoin. I remember having a conversation with the late, great Jaffa Ali, before he sadly passed away. We were talking about regret because I lucky to buy a small amount of Bitcoin very, very early and I cashed it in. And he was saying how he does not live his life with regrets. And he was telling me an anecdote about him in the early 2000s before the dot-com crash. he had the opportunity to sell a dot-com business for an enormous amount of money. I won't say how much, but he said no. And then 2 years later, it was worth nothing. And I said to him, well, how do you live with that regret? And he said, it doesn't matter. He had zero regrets for the path he's taken in life. And it really helped me. It really, really helped me.
No, I'm exactly in this state of mind. Exactly.
And it is a state of mind, but you have to adopt.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, I had some very strong arguments with one of my partners at Risk Data in 2007 because I saw the crisis coming and we were in full success. I said, that's time to sell the company. And then he said, no, the company today is valued at 70 million and we want to reach 100 million before we start talking about selling it. And say, it won't happen. Something is coming. And we didn't do it, and that would have been the right thing to do.
We all have stories like that, I think, and it will eat you alive, and you can't try and post-rationalize the things, I think, looking back. So, okay, let's go back to your teaching, because we've talked about teaching a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How can education prepare students for the future rather than the teacher's past? And what is the role of mathematics in this?
So, and that was another question, which is deeply related to that, is what do you see in the future of science? So obviously the two are, I mean, you need to teach what will be useful in the future, not what will be useful in the past. Now, again, we live in a world where the things are being redefined. We live through a revolution. The importance of it is as big as the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. So the computer, it started with the Internet Revolution. You were mentioning the dot-com bubble. Now we are going through AI, which is a natural follow-up on the Internet Revolution. So what does that mean in terms of science? In terms of science, a new science is born. It is born. It's not, it's going to, it is born. It's called data science. And data science is, a word that encompasses several things. In the past, we were talking about statistics, information theory, decision theory, control theory, etc. Data science contains all of that. But why is it a science and not just, a branch of math? Because it's not math. You see, first, statistics have never been really math. There was always a part of statistics which is practical and a part of statistics which is theory. Exactly like physics. Physics has its experimental aspect and its theoretical aspect. So you have people who think theoretical physics will think like mathematicians. The kind of math that I've done in chaos theory, etc., is obviously very closely related to physics. I've worked a lot with people doing fluid mechanics. That was so moving into now. Data science has again its experimental part and its theoretical part. There is a big thing. I had some arguments with people, about whether artificial intelligence itself is a science. Yeah, why not? You can call it this way. For me, I would see that as a part of data science, because I have this definition of data science. Again, that's wording. So people will differentiate, I don't care. I mean, because there is a lot of marketing in here, and let's try to put ourselves aside from marketing and try to just, put words that best describe the topic. So you have a new science, and I think we need to teach people about this new science with all its methods. I consider that I've done that a lot, that there are some areas of this science that I master, some areas that I don't master, and no less, no more than any physicist who's been really involved in the cutting edge research are also mastering certain areas and not others. But definitely I have this dual experience in theory and in experiments. It's that intersection, I think, that you need between practice and academia. And famously Mandelbrot, who I know you met actually when you were a child. Oh yeah, Mandelbrot, yes, someone He was a close friend of my father. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, just absolutely fantastic. And operating that intersection between theory and practice, and maybe that's what we need to encourage a little bit more. There's a few questions that are related to what you just answered. I'm not going to ask you to repeat yourself because I imagine they're very similar. But people are asking, how do we train the next generation of scientists? People have been asking about what scientific disciplines do you think will shape finance the most in the next 10 to 20 years? And I can imagine I know the answer from that, just what you've answered.
No, I mean, you see that what happened is obviously, you have to realize, I like the comparison with the 19th century industrial revolution. Thermodynamics is born from that. People were building machines. And because they were building machines, cars, trains, etc., thermodynamics was at the center of it. You had to find, the way to convert one kind of energy, namely heat, into work. And you had to find the optimal way of doing it, etc. Mm-hmm. So, and then the other thing that, is less popular, but it's noble, etc., is chemistry. Mm-hmm. There was a huge development of chemistry. You see that in both cases, that went for the best and for the worst. That was, we are very glad today, and I forgot the third aspect was electricity.
Yeah.
With the famous battle between Tesla and Edison, and Edison had his ideas, but he was a killer. So he did everything to make sure that Tesla's idea would not prevail, whereas Tesla was physically much more on the spot. And the fact that we're using alternative current today, and we are rediscovering even today things that Tesla was trying to do at that time. And Tesla was an absolute genius.
It's interesting. It's like when you look at innovation and the evolution of science since the Industrial Revolution, it's been these, rapid advancements and plateaus in different disciplines, and then another one comes along. And you need the combination before you can advance. And you talked about thermodynamics and computing. And look at Charles Babbage, who tried with his analytical engine and difference engine to try and build a very, very early mechanical programmable computer. But because the electrical revolution hadn't happened yet, he wasn't quite able to turn that into reality.
Yeah.
So, you can be the most intelligent, amazing person in the world, but unless you have that, unless the whole system is at the state where you can be in the right place at the right time to take advantage of that.
So that's, you see, basically you will see in the advance of science, you will see two sources. This, industrial need that pushes, pressures for finding solutions, and that pushes physics, ahead. And also, of course, the military. It's interesting to see, that, for instance, we first, the first usage of planes was essentially military. And then eventually people went to civil aviation. Same thing for nuclear. And eventually we came to nuclear plants, etc. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of technology that starts military and then was used in the civil industry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. NASA as well, going back to your space industry, but I know NASA isn't technically military, but kind of quasi-military organizations, a lot of the innovations that came from the space race.
Yeah, but except that in the space there is something that was, it was also hubris. There was this fight during the Cold War. Both the US and Soviet Union wanted to be, the first one there. So they got Gagarin, then they got Saturn V, etc. The Apollo program. There was a competition which was not military. It was like the best, it looks like, a football game that takes a political dimension. Mm-hmm. But except it's a full game with billions of dollars, to do something completely crazy, etc. That's neither civil nor military.
It's a great analogy because I think it's even called the nuclear football, wasn't it, that the president carried?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, going back to what's happening today, started with the internet and then now with AI, it's something that is deeply in data science. And that's why you get this emerging of this new science, because it is needed. You have an industrial revolution, and it is the point of that industrial revolution. It's no chance that the companies that are the most value, the biggest market cap today, they don't produce actual device; they produce data. And when we click on Google, it's free, etc. When we use a search engine, we use Yahoo data, we use etc. It's all free. The reason it's free is that in fact we are paying with information about ourselves. So you see that the economics have nothing to do with traditional economics. It has completely changed the economic relationship between consumers, clients, producers, employees, etc.
I've heard it said before that, if something is free, if a product is free, you are the product.
You're the product. That's one of Nassim's jokes, yeah? But the point beyond that I want to make is that all traditional economic models, that you see with cost of labor and cost of, etc., innovation, it's invalid. It's invalid because the basis of the economic relationship has changed completely. Because it's no longer a matter of I buy some item from you for a certain price and that you will put some new things in it. No, it's data that I'm buying from you. And what is data? Now comes the data. Now comes the real thing. And that's the difficult question. And that's what people, so you see, we're trying to form students. What is a good engineer? Someone who has the basic math that they need. There will always be a very thin layer of people who are doing research at the top level, and they will push the stuff further, etc., the knowledge further, the understanding further. That will be always a very thin layer. Of course, I'm passionate with this kind of people. I think I'm a bit part of it, etc., and that's what thrives me. But to be honest, if I look at my students, the vast majority are more like engineers. We would have called them engineers in the past century. Call them quants, call them whatever you want. I mean, that's people who have this role. They're more actually building the systems, the products, the thing that work. And a good engineer is someone who has, the math that is needed, has, the basic understanding of the theory at different levels. Mm-hmm. And this capability to transform that into systems that work. Yeah. Today is by programming. Before it could have been, by actually engineering, etc. But it's making, those things that work. Yeah. And the thing that work, is, you can have a theoretical calculation of some parameter, but at some point the value of the parameter comes from the usage that you will have to do. I mean, if I'm telling you that the tire of your car has 3 kilos of pressure, you can make a theoretical calculation, but it just happened that you tried 2.5 and it was not enough, and tried 3.5, it was too big, and 3 works. That's engineering.
It's like we have you talk about the thin layer of the true pushing the paradigm forward, and then underneath that a larger layer of transforming that into application, the engineers, again going back to the Industrial Revolution analogy, but the people who built the infrastructure of the Industrial Revolution and building that out. And it's almost like they operate at this, maybe what I would call like a platonic fold, where they're pushed against each other, and out of it emerges application and real world application.
Yeah. So if you want to teach, you have to prepare the students for this kind of world in which, and that's why it's difficult, because you have to pick up in the traditional teaching thing that they will use. Now, the interesting thing I noticed is that compared to traditional computer science, AI uses a lot of math, actually much more math than and so people have to go back. I was in the space industry. In space industry, you get a lot of precisely fluid mechanics, positioning, control theory, etc. These are very difficult maths. Not exactly the math of AI. It's more like PDEs, etc., partial differential equations. But there's some very difficult math. So even engineers who went to engineer school, they still had to progress in their math for their particular problem. Yeah. Same thing in here. They learn computer science, they learn the methods, etc. And then they go and work. My area is finance, so they will work with hedge funds, with banks, etc. And then they get all these data to analyze. And what is the first thing about data is what is data? What is information?
Yeah.
How do you transform? How do you extract information from data? And I see it as practically as easy as extracting metal from ore. So you get this earth. You see the pool of data, this big data, as being untreated earth containing, there is some information in it, but exactly. And then the whole thing is to go from this massive pool of data and extracting information that will be useful for the purpose you want to achieve.
Like a refinement.
Exactly. And that's exactly that. That's a refinery thing. And that's where the value is. That's why data, you provide a lot of data. By being yourself, by using all the social network, etc. Invisibly, you're providing data, but that data is raw data. It's unmanageable. And all those engineers are employed, at least a large portion of them are employed at transforming this raw data into useful information. And that contains very repetitive, stupid work that actually progressively becomes roboticized. Sorry, how do you say it in English?
Two things I want to pick up on there. Firstly, we're talking about the amount of math in data science and AI compared to traditional computer science. And that's absolutely something I see as a software engineer. There's this myth. But, programmers, you need to be really good at math. And it's not really true. And a lot of colleagues I see now want to go into AI because obviously it's a huge trend at the moment. And they're hitting this roadblock of, the upskill required in math is significant. If you really want to understand it, of course, there are tools you can apply and still do very successfully without understanding truly underneath. But there really is a difference. And the refinery you're talking about in data, that's so true. Because when you look, even the terminology we use in our industry sounds like refinery. We talk about data pipelines. We talk about data lakes. We talk about fire hoses, it's all this. So there is this strong analogy there with extraction and refinement. Absolutely fascinating. And so we're at an hour. I'm gonna ask maybe one or two very more quick questions that we've got on this list, and I'm going to move on slightly from academics and theory. So, in your opinion, in your profession or in your life, what is one opinion or one position you have that very few people agree with you on?
I have political provocative idea, and I have an issue with social network software because they will tend to put me in a box where I don't belong to, simply because I'm criticizing another box. So those software, they're very simple. They put boxes A, B, C, D, so call it right, left, controversial, whatever, and they if you start criticizing one box, automatically they put you in the other box. And then they feed you with information from it. Let me give you an information, something politically, for instance. My entire family has been made, on my father's side, of resistance to the Nazi. They were really deeply involved in resistance. There was a famous resistant lady who just passed away. There was books published on her. She speaks of my grandfather, etc. There are really deep things. Traditionally, I couldn't say because there was right and left. No, that was not even so important. Some were following the goal, some were more on the left side, but it doesn't matter. The deep thing that, the family, the DNA of the family is anti-fascist. We hate totalitarian. And myself, I would say even among my cousins, I'm probably one of the most prominent, passionate about individual freedom. I literally hate the idea that someone could have the idea of possessing another individual. The idea of possessing another individual or being possessed by another individual is something that despises me completely. Mm-hmm. That's personal feelings. You share, you don't share. That's how I feel.
It's interesting what you're saying about social networks. I think it plays to that human tendency to want to compartmentalize people and individuals.
Yeah. Guess what? Today, when we have all these, people who like controlling, putting data, etc., and these mainstream things. So I'm very hard. I mean, on that side, I've been, laughed at because I was backing completely Trump, not Musk, in his, defense of total freedom of speech. Okay, I'm a bit radical on that side, but that's my personal idea. And of course, as a consequence, especially in France, because I'm following the social network both in French and in English, and in the French side, they put me I'm totally fed with information from anti-vax, from the extreme right, Le Pen, and this kind of people. On the American side, on the Trumpists, including the very redneck type of Trumpists, etc., because I was criticizing the other side. And I cannot feel more different from those people who are collaborationists of Nazi. You see, and yet, so in that way, politically speaking, I cannot be placed neither right nor left, etc., because I will always be an extremely independent thinker. Mm-hmm.
I am in the same position as you, where I don't fit into a box, and I get criticized by friends alike on either side. And the danger, of course, is that by the algorithm putting us into boxes or encouraging us into boxes, it's all to drive engagement, right? And, in the 60s and 70s, they might have said sex sells, and now it's almost like conflict sells. And media wants us to be, friends and family to be at each other's throats because it drives engagement. And I just see it as crazy that I see it like football fanatics or sports fanatics. You get a certain small amount of people, and whether they're extreme left or extreme right, and they're shouting at each other. And I want to say to them, you are the exact same type of personality. You are on the ideological opposite. You are the extremists on either side who wear a red shirt or a blue shirt and shout at each other across the football field. And other than the surface difference of your ideology, you're the same person.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, social media is driving the people in the center further out.
Yeah, that's one of the effects is radicalizing. Actually, Friedrich von Hayek in his book, which I love, was my preferred book. And I was asked, that's one of the books I would really recommend very deeply, is The Road to Serfdom. It's a small book. It's maybe 100, 150 pages. It's a very small book compared to the big volume that he wrote. And as he says, it's not an economics book, it's a political book. And he wrote that in 1942 in London. He was Austrian, lived in London. And he said, essentially in the book, we see a fight between Soviets and Nazi. In fact, there are two predators chasing on the same ground. That's why they are fighting. It's like lions and tigers, but they are exactly the same nature. And the only people that they despise, that they can't stand, is this. He calls himself a liberal, an old-fashioned liberal.
I haven't read that book for a long time, and I will probably reread it.
So yeah, we are always, when you get this kind of thing, as you say, supporter of two teams, we are at the thing. I mean, I think one of the things, that for instance, that it's always the same thing. I mean, you see cycles, and even Socrates himself was speaking of those cycles, about, the autocracy, monarchy, ochlocracy, etc., democracy. He described the whole cycle, and it's like, a cycle you're a prisoner of, you cannot do anything out. And I would like to say, but, there is nothing better than capitalism, than the idea of freedom, etc. And yet, it contains its own end, because that's what we are seeing today. What is the disease of the day is, and you're asking where I deeply disagree with a lot of people, is that we are living in a world where corruption has grown to a point where it's like, the frogs that are in a pan, and the water is progressively heating, and there is no particular trigger point. So, bit of corruption always happens in business. It's if you think that you're going to avoid it, etc., that's completely illusory. And trying to be radical and completely eliminating. That's a bit like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. I mean, he made the success of Singapore thanks to completely eliminating corruption. I can tell you from corruption, my grandfather was a medical doctor who decided to fight tuberculosis. And he managed to eliminate tuberculosis in France. How did he do that? He did several things. He did sanatoriums for students. He generalized the usage of, at that time it was Remifon, the antibiotic that was used, to cure tuberculosis. And he also installed the mandatory, he was the first in the world, because when people tell me I'm anti-vax, etc., he was the first in the world to do a mandatory BCG vaccine for the kids. And that eradicated tuberculosis. It was a joint action of several things. Was he blind on side effects? Not at all. We're speaking of it all the time. He was watching the thing. He attacked a story that was centuries long of history. He just decided, okay, we need to get rid of that disease. It was not fabricated in a lab. It was not we are going to save the world thanks to vaccines, etc. It was one particular disease he decided to get rid of. Was there corruption? He was still complaining. It's all led by finance, etc. I'm trying to do medicine for he was basically the what he called, the directeur de la santé, so head of health. Basically, the position of Fauci. He was having that in France in the late 50s, early 60s, pre-De Gaulle, pre-Mélenchon, and pre-De Gaulle. This kind of person. The same guy who was hiding resistance in his sanatoriums during the war. Just what I was talking about.
It's interesting. I used to get quite angry about corruption and kind of grifters and things like that. And a friend told me one interesting thing that you have to remember is that every interesting ecosystem will always have kind of parasitic layer. And if you are operating in an environment where there is corruption or grifting or even the mafia, things like that, you're operating in an interesting ecosystem at least.
Yeah. No. That's what I was saying. You see, you always have some of it in here. Now, where it becomes more difficult is the following. It becomes dangerous the fact that, you see, a business does everything to develop its business, that's part of the game. And so the role of the state here is to control the appetite of the business. The fact that business people are predators, if they are not, there is no business. So you are killing the business. If you try everybody will be sheep, etc., then there will be no business. You need to have the world is made of predators and prey, etc. That's don't dream. But the role of the state is precisely so that we don't live in the law of the jungle, because the law of the jungle has two ends. Either one of the super predator eats everyone, or the super predator is eaten by a colony of ants. Or viruses or bacteria, whatever you want. And then the story restarts.
It again go back to the cycle.
Exactly those cycles. So when you see businesses, you will always have that. And the role of the state is really to impose regulation. If it becomes the interest of the business to buy the regulator, and it has a name. It's called capture of the regulatory capture. I've worked on that. We're talking of Labex. I've worked on that regulatory capture a lot in terms of in the banking industry. I know exactly how it works. I've seen it. I've described it. I've proposed solutions to control regulatory capture, etc. Where they apply, no, because precisely there was too many interests to maintain this regulatory capture. And regulatory capture, it's like drugs for the business. It's heroin for the business. It makes it cool. The business is now nice, beautiful, etc. Nobody is ahead of you except that you are heading directly to the wall. So that's why I was, when I saw the COVID thing, I saw the exact same mechanism of regulatory capture that I was working on for the financial industry. I saw that in the pharmacy industry. Did that exist at my grandfather's time? No. There was corruption. There was pressure. There was etc. But it was not at that scale. It was not at the scale of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture means that precisely you get people like Fauci who are now the actors of the corruption. They are not trying to resist the pressure. They become the actors. And so those people who are in place, who are supposed to be, etc., they become the same story led to the 2008 crisis, to the 2007, to the subprime crisis. And then they tried to blame the quants, etc. It was a banking story. They were giving loans to anyone because it was practical, it was just crazy, etc. And they were also, banks were selling all these credit derivatives that were, repackaging completely crazy loans into acceptable products, etc. So it was a whole thing that you knew was a dead end, and we saw the end in 2008.
Do you see, and I probably will have to make this the last question. I wish I could spend hours with you, but do you see, are we reaching a tipping point again? I mean, we're seeing huge, enormous asset inflation over the last 5 or 10 years. We're kind of coming out of the ZERP phenomenon hangover. We have a whole generation of property owners. We have a whole generation of finance professionals who have never known anything but ZERP. Do you think we're heading for another shift, state change, crash, call it what you want, or maybe more of a slow deflation? Or business as usual?
First of all, I don't see any solution to the debt. I like, finding solution to great problems like this, unless, I would say a massive market crash is the least damaging solution I see to the debt, because I see three exits to this debt problem. One is a big market crash and redefinition, like 29. The second possibility is the money becoming meaningless. So total slow drift to systematically bailing out and saving, so printing, etc. So they're becoming basically meaningless, and that is a slow drift from capital economy to Soviet economy. In capital economy, shelves are full, but people don't have money to buy items on the shelves. In Soviet economy, people have plenty of money, but shelves are empty and they can't do anything with their money. So the supply chain is broken because there is no incentive. So we see a slow drift toward that. And the third one, which is much, much more dramatic, would be a world war. Redefining, because obviously all the East, whether it's the BRICS, Russia, China, are going back to really manufacturing, producing commodities and manufactured products that are needed by the West. So we are no longer in the pure data economy, pure virtual economy, and so they will want to fence their business. It's not only the US who are going to fence; it's going to be fenced on both sides, and so either it goes to a cold war or it can go to a hot war, and that is there is pressure, surprisingly, on this side, where people want to go to a hot war because they feel like it's not sustainable. And so kind of a redivision of the world would be one of the least dramatic outcomes. So now talking markets, the kind of direction in which I'm advising my clients, who are asking what I'm long, I'm trying to put in place strategies that preserve or even increase their wealth in two situations: a slow increase or a big crash. But a sudden rise of the S&P by 20% in less than 1 month, I think it's unlikely. It may happen, but I don't think it's likely. And a slow decrease, a stagnation possibly, a slow decrease is something that, I'm not saying the probability is zero. I'm just saying that in my designer strategy, that would be the losing thing.
Wow. Very, very sobering words to finish with, but important. And I think it'll be interesting to have listeners dwell on that final few minutes and really share some thoughts. And maybe we can have a talk on the Fat Tony Surfer about that at a later date. I must end it here. We've already gone over time. I've tried to keep you as long as possible, but, Raphael Douady, thank you so, so much. Very final thoughts. Do you have anything you want to give a shout out to or a plug to? If people are interested in the Primers course, is there a website?
Well, this Primers lecture that I'm giving now about 3 times a year, that actually initially were a spin-off from the RORI, from the real world risk stuff with Nassim and Robert. Now I'm doing that. It's more, it came from a demand from the participants to go a bit deeper in the calculation. So very practical. So there are 3 series on the practical probability, I call it, processes where we understand, the dynamics, random dynamics. This one is more towards trading, etc. And the third one is purely on AI with my friend Patrice Skinner. So Patrice is really engineer, so we are a good balance to understand, really opening the trunk and looking at how the engine works inside. Probably the next session in February or March. February, probably, end of February.
We'll include links to, obviously Raphael's social profiles, but websites and all that kind of stuff if people are interested. Whatever platform you're listening on, the link should be below when you're listening to this. So thank you so, so much, Raphael. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.